Well, hey there, friends. I'm your host, Penny, and this is Criminally Nerdy. Hey, everybody. We are traveling down under to Australia today, so I guess instead of asking how you're doing, I should ask, how are you going? I'm doing pretty good over here. Someone called me their emotional support penny, and so that's a high I won't be coming down from anytime soon. I hope that your week is off to a good start. If it's not, go back home. Try it again tomorrow. Tell your boss I said it was okay. If they have a problem with it, tell them to call me. I'm not going to answer. It's the perfect plan. I wanted to thank you all for hanging in there with me. I am clearly brand new to podcasting, so I'm still figuring a lot out. And I appreciate you all sticking it out while I found my groove. You are seriously the best. And I know I say that all the time, but I really mean it. And I'm so thankful. If I could hug each one of you, I would, except for Lindsay. Lindsay feels about hugs the way I feel about phone calls. But hugs for the rest of you. Thanks for continuing to listen, continuing to tell your friends, and for sending me the super awesome sticker pictures. I'm loving them. I'm not really sure exactly how many I have left, but I do have a few more. So if you're wanting to get in on that before they're gone, let me know. Also, I asked and you all answered, so my next bonus episode will be on the Stanford prison experiment. I'll be doing bonus episodes on the first of every month, so be on the lookout for an extra shot of nerdiness in your life. The case I have for you today is of Katherine Knight, also known as the Female Hannibal Lecter, the Cannibal Cook, Lady Leatherface, and the Black Knight. She was the first woman to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in Australia. Though her final act was one of the most gruesome in Australia's history, the events leading up to it made it clear that she was capable of extreme violence. Some of my sources for this episode were Wikipedia, Murderpedia, All Things Interesting, also Morbid Podcast, and The Last Podcast on the Left did awesome episodes on this case, so check those out if you get the chance. Katherine Knight was born on October 24th, 1955, to Barbara and Ken Knight. Her mother, Barbara, had originally been married to a man named Jack. The two of them had 4 sons. She then began an adulterous relationship with her husband's co-worker, Ken. Coming from a small town called Aberdeen in New South Wales Hunter Valley, the community's criticism forced Ken and Barbara to move to Moree in northern South Wales. 2 of Barbara and Jack's sons stayed with their father, while the other 2 went to live with their aunt in Sydney. Barbara and Ken had 4 children, including twin girls Catherine and Joy. Barbara's ex-husband Jack died in 1959 when Catherine was 4. It was at this time that Barbara and her first husband Jack's 2 sons came to live with Barbara and Ken. Barbara's second husband Ken was a violent alcoholic. He not only beat Barbara in front of the children, but raped her up to 10 times per day. Barbara would openly tell her children intimate details of their sex life. She would also tell them how much she hated sex and she hated men. When Catherine was a little bit older, she told her mom that a partner was asking her to do something in bed that she wasn't really comfortable with, and her mother responded by saying, quote, "Put up with it and stop complaining." Great parenting there, Barb. Just fucking superior. Catherine claims that she was sexually assaulted by several members of her family, though she made it clear that none of them were her father. She said this happened up until around age 11. There were many initial doubts about these claims, but psychiatrists believe her to be telling the truth. In later years, the events were confirmed by other members of the family. Eventually, the family moved back to Aberdeen, which was known for its slaughterhouse industry. Catherine and Joy attended Muswellbrook High School. Catherine was known as a loner and a bully. She would pick on younger children. She assaulted at least one boy with a weapon, and herself was once injured by a teacher who was acting in self-defense. She was also known around town to have these dark moods, but oddly enough, when she wasn't in one of those moods, she was a model student and was extremely kind and caring. I'll touch on this a bit later, but it was like a switch would flip in her. She left school at the age of 15. At this time, she was unable to read or write, leaving her illiterate by today's standards, though this wasn't entirely uncommon for the time and this area. After spending some time in a clothing factory, she set her sights on the Aberdeen Meat Company. After failing her first, quote, audition, which I don't even want to know what that could be, she finally landed what she called her dream job at the local abattoir, which is what they call a slaughterhouse, in the offal room, which is where they cut up intestines and internal organs that will be used in food. She landed this position in 1974 at the age of 18. She caught her coworkers' attention with one very unusual behavior. She liked to go over to the front of the production line and watch the pigs have their throats slit. At first, they thought maybe she was just trying to learn, but they soon realized that she enjoyed watching them be slain. When she was promoted to work in that area, she would not cut the throats quickly as they were supposed to do to lessen the animal's suffering. She would instead nick an artery and watch them bleed out slowly. She was again promoted to boning, and yes, I'm suppressing my laughter. With this promotion, she was given her own set of butcher's knives, which she took home and hung over her bed. As you do, you know. She was very obsessed with knives. Up until her incarceration, Catherine always had a set of knives hung over her bed so that they would always be handy if I needed them. Catherine was well known around town for her strength. She was over 6 feet tall, and some described her physique as masculine. She was also known for physically threatening anyone who pissed her off. David Kellett became friends with Knight's brother and also happened to be Catherine's coworker. Catherine and David started dating in 1973. David was a heavy drinker and would often find himself getting into bar fights, even though most regarded him as a generally kind man. Catherine would always come to his aid in a fight, ready to square up with anyone who dared to cross him. They were married in 1974. From what I've been able to gather, it didn't seem like she really gave him much of a choice. When they arrived at the ceremony, Kellett was already shit-faced drunk. David later recalled that Catherine's mother, good old Barb, pulled him to the side before the ceremony and did what many parents do and gave her future son-in-law some marriage advice. She said, quote, "You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing on her. She'll fucking kill you. She's got something loose. She's got a screw loose somewhere." End quote. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the exact same conversation my mom had with my wife at our wedding, so. On their wedding night, David woke up to Catherine attempting to strangle him. Not in a sexy way. This was not consensual. Why then? Why, you ask? Because he had only had sex with her 3 times before falling asleep, and she knew that her parents had consummated their marriage 5 times on their wedding night. 1. Why did she know this, Barbara? Have you ever heard of a little thing called oversharing? Especially with your children? 2. Is this a competition? If so, why are you competing with your parents? Why are you thinking about your parents at that time? Also, like, it's 3 times, girl. Just call it good. Go again in the morning if you're determined to, like, hit a certain tally. Damn. Somehow he just got over this. Their marriage continued on, but it was an incredibly violent one. From what I can tell, it was Catherine who was the aggressor. On one occasion, a heavily pregnant Catherine burnt all of David's clothes and shoes before hitting him in the head with a frying pan. Like, is this a cartoon? Would you like to know what sent Catherine into such a rage? I sure did. She was angry with David for coming home late from a darts competition because his team had made it to the finals. He fled to a neighbor's house, probably in fear for his life, and was treated for a severely fractured skull. Police wanted to charge Catherine, but she changed up her behavior and siren-songed David into dropping the charges. What? What kind of spell did she cast over this man? Shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa, in 1976, David left Catherine for another woman and moved to Queensland. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that one day he woke up and Catherine was straddling him, holding a knife to his neck, laughing about how easy it would be to slit his throat. When he left her, she reportedly threatened to cut their daughter into pieces and then proceeded to swing the baby girl around by her ankles. The next day, Catherine was seen pushing her baby in a stroller down Main Street, violently throwing it from side to side. She was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital and diagnosed with postnatal depression. She spent several weeks in the hospital recovering. And I am not trying to take away from postnatal depression at all. It is extremely serious and it should be dealt with as such. But the violent behavior she had already displayed through her life, that was just there. That was in her. And it should have been a bigger scare to everyone around her. If anything, they should have treated her more seriously than just your average case of postpartum. After being released from the hospital, Catherine placed her 2-month-old daughter Melissa on a railway line shortly before a train was scheduled to come through. She then stole an axe, went to town, and threatened to kill several people. Thankfully, a local homeless man, fondly known as Old Ted, happened to be foraging near the railway and found the baby. He rescued her only minutes before the train came by. Catherine was arrested again and admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital, where she signed herself out the next day. What? A few days after her release, she took her infant daughter to the home of one of her teenage coworkers. The woman's son answered the door. Catherine told her coworker that her baby was sick and that she needed to go to a hospital in Queensland. The woman immediately agreed. Of course, your baby's sick. I'm going to help you. Catherine said she needed to go back to her house to grab a few things and asked that the woman pick her up there. The woman agreed. She packed up her children and proceeded to Catherine's house. When they arrived and Catherine saw that the car was full of children, she became enraged and pulled out a knife, saying that there were too many people and she was going to have to get rid of some of them. She began wildly looking around her yard, which it was later found is where she kept her gun. By a stroke of luck, her father had taken and hidden the gun away while she was admitted to the hospital. He probably saved an entire family's life with that move. She started swinging the knife around and actually cut one of the girls in the face. Then she pivoted and decided to just take them hostage and force them to drive her to Queensland. They eventually convince her that they need to stop for gas, and she agreed. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. When they stopped, the woman and her children escaped and barricaded themselves inside the office of the service station. Catherine was so furious that she ripped a blade off of a lawnmower with her bare hands. Her bare fucking hands. A lawnmower blade. She did this so that she could hack the door down. Mind you, she is doing all of this while holding her infant daughter. She eventually got through the door just enough to grab one of the young boys and hold him hostage. Thankfully, police arrived and were able to disarm her by attacking her with brooms. You heard me right, and they don't call brooms something different in Australia. Brooms. What you sweep your floor with. She was then taken and admitted to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital, but she wasn't given any criminal charges. She confessed to doctors and nurses that she had intended to kill the mechanic who had repaired David's car, which allowed him to leave. She then planned to kill her husband and his mother when she got to Queensland. When the police informed David Kellett of this incident, he did what anyone would do. He left his girlfriend, and then he and his mother moved back to Aberdeen to support Catherine. So many things don't make sense to me. Catherine was released on August 9th, 1976, into the care of her mother-in-law and husband David. They moved to Ipswich, where she got a job at Dinmore Meatworks. David and Catherine had another daughter, Natasha, in March of 1980. In 1984, Catherine left David. I know, I didn't see that coming either. She moved home to her parents' house in Aberdeen. She then rented a house in nearby Muswellbrook. She continued working at the slaughterhouse. At some point, she injured her back, which many say was intentional, and was placed on disability. No longer needing to live close to her work, the Housing Commission gave her a residence in Aberdeen, and that is kind of what we would refer to as public housing. She met 38-year-old miner David Saunders in 1986. He was known as a very gentle man who loved dogs. He moved in with her and her 2 daughters after a couple of months, though he did keep his apartment in Scone. This pissed her off, and she got super jealous, wanting to know what he was doing when she was not around. She threw him out multiple times. Each time she would beg him to come back, and he did. He just did. And I need to know what the fuck she could possibly be saying to get these men to come back to her. Not that the rest of this has been a walk in the park, but this part is extra sad. So please brace yourself or fast forward a few seconds. After an argument in May 1987, she slit the throat of his 2-month-old dingo puppy in front of him as a warning of what would happen to him if he ever cheated on her. And then she got her good old friend the frying pan and knocked him unconscious. In June of 1988, Katherine gave birth to her third daughter, Sarah. After another argument, she hit Saunders in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors. It was at this point that he had decided he'd had enough and moved back to his apartment in Scone. This this point, this point, what is happening? The tolerance these men have is beyond me. I I do feel like I would have left multiple assaults ago, but she was a very talented manipulator. When he returned to get his things, he found that she had cut all of his clothes into pieces. He actually then took a long leave of absence and went into hiding because he was so scared of her. After a few months, he resurfaced to visit his daughter and found that Catherine had gone to the police and unjustly told them that she was afraid of him. So she was granted an apprehended violence order, which is our version of a restraining order. She wasn't just violent to the men in her life. I'm sure she wasn't a treat to any of her children, but the two stories I read were involving her daughter Melissa. When Melissa was 12 years old, she interrupted a conversation that her mom was having with a friend, which, like, who the hell is friends with you? And so Catherine just walked over to her 12-year-old daughter and punched her in the face. When Melissa was a bit older, she was out drinking with friends, as people do, and apparently her mother showed up. She grabbed her by the hair and smashed her face repeatedly into a table. When Melissa fell to the ground, her mother then drug her by her hair to the car. She then smashed Melissa's face one more time against the car, for good measure, before throwing her into the vehicle and taking her home. Witnesses say that they saw this attack, but everyone in the bar was too scared to do anything. In 1991, she became pregnant again by a man named John Chillingworth, a former coworker. She gave birth the following year to their son Eric. She refused to let Chillingworth move in with her. Oversharing Barb had recently passed away, so Catherine had inherited her house. Catherine proceeded to decorate the home in unusual fashion. She decorated it with animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, leather boots, machetes, rakes, pitchforks, old farm equipment, and let's not forget the ever present knife set above the bed. I mean, hey, I have a kooky sense of decorating too, which, my wife largely puts the kibosh on, but I try. You'll find skulls and creepy things in my house, but this was excessive. She and Chillingworth were together for 3 years, but it finally came to an end when she went into a rage and smashed his false teeth into pieces. She then met John Price at a club, which is something my brain refuses to picture. His nickname was Pricey. He was born April 4th, 1955. Everyone referred to him as a terrific bloke. He had 3 children with his ex, Colleen, who he had a very amicable split with. In fact, they were never actually divorced, they were only separated. After their split, their youngest daughter lived with Colleen and the 2 older children lived with him. Colleen actually insisted that he keep the house that they had had when they were married, which is, kind of unusual. People usually fight over the house, but no. She referred to him as a very gentle soul. She was later quoted as saying, "He was one of the kindest, gentlest men I knew. I know he would have never put a hand on her." When he began dating Catherine, his oldest child was an adult and his 2 younger children were teenagers. Even though John was aware of her violent reputation, he allowed her to move in with him in 1995. John and Catherine had countless arguments, many of them revolving around the fact that he refused to marry her. At one point, she stole his money and bought herself an engagement ring. Even when she did this, he stood firm in his insistence that he would not marry her. She was also upset that not only had he never divorced his ex, who she suspected he was still in love with, but that he had left his home and all of his belongings to his children in the event of his death. Gee, what a terrible guy, making sure his children are taken care of. In retaliation for what she saw as rejection, She videotaped items in his shed that she claimed he had stolen from work and sent the tape to his boss. These items were out of date medical kits that had been thrown away and he had then taken out of the garbage. He was in no way stealing from his employer. Unfortunately, though, he was fired from the job he had been at for 17 years, where he was making a good living, and he lost his pension due to being fired for theft. The same day this happened, he kicked her ass out, which, good for you, dude. Good. The news of what she did spread throughout town, and everyone looked at her with even more disgust than usual. Unfortunately, he restarted the relationship with her a few months later for reasons I can't even fathom. I cannot picture a scenario where allowing this psychopath back into your life is going to have any sort of positive outcome. This time, though, he did refuse to let her move in with him. Predictably, this caused a lot of fighting, which became more frequent and more violent. His friends no longer wanted anything to do with him because of Catherine. Their last fight culminated with Catherine stabbing him in the chest. He ran to a neighbor's house frightened and told them that she had gone for the butcher knife. This was the last straw. He kicked her out for good on February 28, 2000, and filed with the magistrate for a restraining order to keep her away from himself and his children. That same day, he told coworkers that if he did not come to work the next day, it would be because Catherine had murdered him. They begged him not to go home, but he said he was afraid if he didn't, she would kill his children. When he returned home, he found that neither Catherine or his children were there. She had sent her 2 children to stay with her older daughter Natasha and sent John's 2 children to stay the night with their mother. Relieved, he went to hang out with one of his neighbors for the evening before coming home around 11 o'clock and going to bed. Alright, guys, this is where things get very, very ugly. I know it's been really bad so far, but this is her finale. The same day John had filed for the protective order, Catherine's behavior got very strange. She stopped by her sister's house to get a video camera that she had left there a while ago. She then went to her daughter Natasha's house and recorded a video of herself playing with Natasha's baby. At one point, she morbidly looks into the camera and says, quote, "I love all of my children. I hope to see you all again." She made sure to videotape herself with all of her children and had them say things that some interpreted as a makeshift will. It's kind of unclear if she was planning to kill herself or make it look as though John killed her. She took her daughter Natasha out to dinner at a Chinese restaurant that night and said, quote, "I want it to be special." Natasha picked up on this bizarre behavior and said to her mother right out, quote, "I hope you're not going to kill Pricey or yourself." After dinner, Catherine had gone and purchased some black lingerie from a thrift store, which, ew, okay, ew. I am so down for being thrifty, but there are some things you should bite the bullet and buy brand new. Like, I don't know, anything that's possibly been cradling a stranger's genitals. She arrived at John's house sometime after he had gone to bed, watched a little TV, took a shower, and then woke him up. The two had sex, and John fell back to sleep. We're now well after midnight and into what will be a very unlucky leap day, February 29th, 2000. While he was sleeping, Catherine pulled out her trusty knife set and stabbed him. According to the evidence at the scene, he made an attempt to get away. He made it all the way to the front door, which was confirmed by blood evidence on the door handle, and actually made it out the door, which was confirmed by blood on the front step. This was before Knight caught up to him and drug him back inside. During the chase, she was still frantically stabbing him before he collapsed. There was blood everywhere. One pool of blood measured 3 feet by 6 feet. His autopsy showed that he had been stabbed a total of 37 times. After killing him, she showered again, took his ATM card, and withdrew $1,000 from his account. By the time she returned to the house, he had been dead for several hours. She then used a variety of knives and, as she had done many times with animals in the past, proceeded to skin him in one whole piece. She did this with such precision that later the mortician was actually able to sew the skin back onto his body. She hung the skin up on a hook in the front room where it stayed until police removed it. Some officers didn't even realize what it was when they first saw it because they'd never seen such a thing. It wasn't until they noticed hair and facial features that it was actually a human pelt. After skinning him, she decapitated him. She placed his head into a simmering pot along with vegetables on the stove. It was still warm when investigators found it. She placed his flayed, headless body in an armchair with his legs crossed and his left arm draped over an empty 2-liter soda bottle. She cooked portions of him and served it along with vegetables and a homemade gravy. She set up 2 full plates at the table along with note cards, which have never been released, addressed to his 2 children. No, you are not jumping to conclusions right now. She was absolutely preparing to serve him to his children. She also left a massively misspelled handwritten note on top of a picture of John on the table. The note read, quote, "Time got you back, Jonathan, for raping my daughter. You to Beck," which was Price's daughter, "for Ross, for little John," which was Price's son. "Now play with little John's dick, John Price." End quote. The accusations of assault in the note were found to be baseless. A 3rd meal was found in the backyard. It's been speculated that she had either attempted to eat it herself and couldn't, so she threw it out, or she was attempting to feed it to his dogs. At 6 a.m. the next day, a neighbor became concerned that John's car was still in the driveway. His boss had also sent one of his coworkers to check on him. The neighbor and coworker began knocking on doors and windows but got no answer. When they saw blood near the front door, they called police. Police arrived around 8 a.m. and broke down the back door, where they were confronted with what would be the most gruesome scene any of them had ever seen. Meanwhile, Katherine lay comatose in bed from taking a large amount of pills. Police and investigators had never seen such horrors. Photographs of the scene were never released publicly because of their graphic nature. Local media tried to stay away from reporting on the story because the details of the crime were so distressing. Her attempt to plead guilty to manslaughter was immediately rejected. Honestly, I hope they laughed right in her damn face. She was charged with murder, to which she pled not guilty. When the trial began, Justice Barry O'Keefe actually offered prospective jurors the option to be excused due to the graphic nature of the photos. 5 of them took him up on this offer, but as the jury selection continued, more and more dropped out. Knight's attorney spoke with the judge and they adjourned for the day. The very next day, Katherine Knight changed her plea to guilty and the jury was dismissed. It was later made public that Justice O'Keefe had recommended the change of plea. He did order a psychiatric assessment to ensure that she was fit and understood the consequences of her plea. She was found to be sane. 2 different psychiatrists did diagnose her with borderline personality disorder. You remember in the beginning when I said that I was going to come back to how it seemed that she could just flip a switch? Well, we're going to talk about borderline personality, also known as BPD, for just a quick second. Per the DSM, some common presentations of BPD are frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating extremes, impulsivity in areas that are potentially self-damaging, recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, or threats, instability due to reactivity of mood, inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, and transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. Her personality disorder likely played a large role in the difficulties that she had throughout her life, particularly her bursts of rage alternating from extreme violence to extremely kind and caring, and her intense jealousy due to fear of abandonment. This diagnosis helps us to understand her, but I must make it abundantly clear, as was also stated during her trial, borderline personality did not cause this. Katherine Knight caused this. There are many people who live with BPD every day and manage to make it through without skinning or decapitating anyone. BPD was just one piece of her. This happened because the other pieces of her were pure fucking evil. In the words of Dr. House, somewhere out there, there is a tree tirelessly producing oxygen so that she can breathe. She owes it an apology. On November 9, 2001, Justice O'Keefe stated that the nature of this crime and complete lack of remorse required the most severe penalty. He sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He ordered that her papers be marked, quote, "definitely never to be released," end quote. This is the first time a sentence of this nature had been imposed on a woman in Australia's history. Sadly, this case had a ripple effect on many people. John's brother Bob, who attended every hearing and had to hear every repulsive detail, ended up committing suicide shortly after Catherine's sentencing. John Price's children are undoubtedly forever and irrevocably changed due to the ruthless slaying of their father. Some of the officers who worked the scene ended up having to take leave, and many later required therapy. In June of 2006, she appealed the sentence, claiming, quote, "The penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole was too severe for the killing." Too severe? Too severe. You fucking decapitated someone. You decapitated someone. You skinned them. Bitch, just sit down. Sit down. Justices dismissed the appeal in the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal in September, with Justice McClellan writing, quote, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society." Catherine currently resides at the Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, where she is a level 4 prisoner. Though she has no history of violence since being imprisoned, she is always surrounded by 4 guards and is never allowed to step outside. This is where she will stay until the day she dies. Oh, holy shit. All right. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna need some very good vibes sent my way to be able to sleep tonight, or maybe ever again. As I said at the top of the episode, I'm still learning and finding my groove. The tarot thing was really interesting, but I have found that it's something I need to delve a bit deeper into. Apparently, the direction the card is facing and the order in which they are drawn has significance. So, I was going to buy a deck and start learning a bit more, but I suffer from crippling indecision, so I couldn't decide which one to buy. Um, I'll get there eventually. Until I get that figured out, I'm just going to end these episodes with whatever happens to strike my fancy that day. I thought today I might give you a bit of a teaser for next week. Make sure to tune in as we take another trip out of the country. We're heading across the pond to take a look into the case of a killer couple. And just as a fun fact, this episode is being released on April 15th, which is the same day that the 2005 version of Amityville Horror was released at the box office. If you put Ryan Reynolds in anything, I'm gonna watch it. I'd watch him change his socks. I'd watch him eat cereal. I'd watch him do anything. So I will surely take the release anniversary as an excuse to put his pretty face on the screen. All right, that's it for today, my guys, gals, and non binary pals. If you're liking the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps tremendously. Please tell your friends, your family, or any true crime nerds you meet. Again, the more people that are listening, the more fun stuff we can get going. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Criminally Nerdy Podcast, Twitter, X, whatever, at Crime Nerd Pod, or shoot me an email at criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, keep it nerdy. I can't. Ugh, this is so hard to get through. Fuck. Oh, Jesus, fuck. Penny words. I can't say this again. Blah, 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 blah. Words, Penny. Words. They're just words. Why can't you say words?